Then you get to Acts. Acts is a letter about the establishment of the churches. So the Apostle Paul went on, and he was a great missionary. Peter, Mark, they all traveled around to different areas of the known world, and they established God's church. Then we get to the letters that Paul and James and John and Peter were writing to those churches after they were established in the years afterwards. And like I said, read those letters and ask which church was it written to, why was it written, what were they doing that they needed this admonishment, and what was the outcome of it all. Then you'll understand the letters better. Also, along the way, you're going to start to see patterns, and this pattern that I've talked about: God dwelling, us rebelling, us in exile. God dwelling, us rebelling, us in exile, till you get to Christ and we're no longer exiled. You see that pattern throughout. Then at the very end, after all of the letters, you get to one final letter, but this is an apocalyptic letter. It's a letter written to the 7 churches, and 7 is a significant number. It's a meaningful symbol. It means completion or perfection. And so he's not just writing to those specific 7 churches, he is, but by writing to 7 churches, he's also saying to us 21st century Christians, I'm writing to the fullness of the church, us included. So we can take everything that the Bible has to say and see what applications it has for us today, as well as understanding the applications it had in the past. And we can live through his revelation, his special revelation. This that you see, we call that general revelation. In Romans 1, it speaks about people being without excuse for following God or not following God, because you can see his majesty and wisdom right here. I learned all about it in my biology undergrad. Science taught me a lot about God. And it's supposed to teach you, I mean, theoretically, hypothetically, it's supposed to teach you that there is no God. If you're atheists use biology to say there is no God. Christians can use it to say there is one. Look at all this. It's a choice. But for me, it really reconfirmed the wisdom and majesty of God that time in biology. And it's cool to be a biologist as well as a theologian. It's putting the two together is a phenomenal gift that I've been given in this life that I couldn't have planned for or known was coming. It's awesome. But we get to Revelation and those 7 churches, and he has a message. And the message is called the revelation of Jesus Christ. So now let's go, like I said about science and Genesis, and how if you immediately go there with a science bias, you've missed the point. Well, if you go to Revelation with a predictive or speculative, it's not called the book of speculations, and it's not called the book of predictions. It's called the book of revelation of Jesus Christ. It is the revealing of Christ. That is what the book of Revelation is. It's the story of Christ that wraps it all up for us. It's not about predicting who the Antichrist is in the 21st century, and do the locusts in Revelation represent Black Hawk helicopters. It is not about saying that Christ is going to come back in 1988 or 2024, or 2 weeks ago, another priest said, yeah, Christ is coming back Thursday of that week. There's been all of those guys throughout history have been wrong in their predictive speculations about things that are spoken of in Revelation. And that's because they miss the point of what Revelation is for. It is a letter to the church of God that is about our high priest, Jesus Christ, where we see different word pictures because it's an apocalyptic letter. In other words, it's built around visions, illustrations, metaphor, simile, and poetry, and symbolism. And if you're looking to create a literal thing out of the symbol, and that literal thing comes from the 21st century, you're way off. What we need to read it for is the same way we read the rest of Scripture. We need to say, what did this symbol, like coming on the clouds, What did that mean to the people already? To the Jews who were reading this, to the Christians back then that were reading this 2,000 years ago when it was written. We don't need to make up a new symbol. We need to understand what that symbol meant to them, what that metaphor had always meant to them. Then we can better understand and see the pattern from Genesis to Revelation, what Scripture means. So we get through that and we see a picture of the throne room. We see a picture of a great battle. We see a picture of a lamb. We see different animals being used, like a lion, an ox, an eagle. All of those things meant certain things to the people back then, and they were used over and over throughout the Old Testament as well. So it was nothing new to them. It was very much understood. So we don't need to say, well, 666 means this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or the beast is this system or this person. We need to take the theological, conceptual lessons from it that say, this is my king, and I will dwell with you in this new covenant. And when we go to Revelation, the last two books, 21 and 22, we see that there is a new heaven and new earth, a new Jerusalem that is being dwelt in, a new kingdom, and that it will last forever, and his people will reign with him forever. From a creation in Genesis that fell, that atrophied, that entropied, to a creation that he will sustain forever. That is the story of Scripture. Now, that's a framework you can use. Now, as you read through it, fill in all the details using that framework, and it'll make sense to you. You'll start to see that Jesus referred to prophets. He referred to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 6 was one of his favorites. You'll start to see and recognize that it's not all discombobulated and disconnected. It is one specific thread of dwelling, rebelling, exiling, until finally we get to the end where there's no more exile. Now, let's talk about some other threads that you could put on the Bible, because there are others. You can also, now that you understand that one, that I don't think a dispensationalist or a covenantalist or Arminian would argue against. That's why I use that one, because it's an easy way to explain Scripture and understand Scripture. Now let's throw on the other things. You may be a dispensationalist, which means that you're using a theological framework to divide the Scripture into specific eras that mean specific things. If you're a covenantalist, maybe you're a Presbyterian, a Lutheran, you're using a theological overlay on Scripture to say, I'm going to look at just covenants throughout that God made with the Mosaic, the Abrahamic, the New Covenant, the Old Covenant, and I'm going to derive my knowledge that way. Okay. You could also say, I'm going to go through and read the Scripture as a book of God's sovereignty, and you will see that over and over and over. You might also say, I'm going to go through and read it as a book of redemption. And from the very first story to the very last, when you see there is this great story of redemption for human beings through God. And who doesn't love a good redemption story? And then you'll go through it and you say, well, I want to see it as a